Everyone is welcome here, it's time to make new friends. Aquavide Uskava, fill your Glencairn. Share a dram with the spirit of Edmonton.
Slancha! And good evening, whiskey brothers, sisters, and friends, and welcome to episode 85 of the Canadian Whisky Journey's Whiskey Review. I'm Dolph. I am the creator of the Canadian Whisky Journey, the spirit of Edmonton on social media platforms, and your host tonight. Tonight's the third installment of the 2024 Banff Whiskey Experience series. Now, we started with Burwood Distillery about a month ago, and then Wildlife Distillery last week with Matt. And this week we have owner and distiller Stephane Pilon. No, that way. Stephane Pilon. And welcome, Stephane. How you doing?
Good.
And what do you have in your glass tonight? Because I have, there's a picture of Stephane. There we go.
I have the port cask finish.
Nice. And do you have the bottle with you or just that? You want to put the bottle up there so we can get a good look at that as well. All right. And then I'll throw mine up there quickly. So that's mine. I've got Campfire, which is lovely. And I've made quite the dent in it, as you can see. And that's because I'm doing pours like this, a couple ounces each time. So I'm a happy guy tonight. How you doing? Is everything flowing? Everything's good with you guys up there?
Everything is good.
Were you working today? Did you stay for this, or did you go home?
No, we were bottling today and filled 2 barrels as well. So we were just getting behind on that. So it was a pretty busy day.
I was going to say, pretty productive.
Yes, I'd say.
Yes. Tell me what you barreled today and what we can expect to see in 3 to 4 to 5 and plus years.
I barreled Prairie Trio in 2 different barrels. I usually put it into a char number 3. Okay. And I had a char number 2 and a char number 4. And I just put it at the same time. And they're going to be basically going through similar temperature changes. And I want to experiment with that. So that's what I'm doing with those 2. So they're paired together. They're on a single rack. And they're side by side. And slowly, progressively, as they're going through all these temperature changes that we have our barrels go through, I want to sample it and see what transpires, really.
Perfect. I love the experimentation, and we've talked about that before, which is really fun. But I'm going to try to make this a little bit linear, just so we can go. So we're going to go to past, present, future, essentially. Past, we're going to go right back to how you started up, when you started up. And we've discussed this before, and I think the first time was at a whiskey festival. It might have been Taste of Calgary or something. They have a different name for it this year, but we talked about it then. So I'm going to make you repeat yourself, I'm afraid. But for those out there that have never been to Diony, had not been to Alberta or Red Deer, and seen your beautiful distillery, I don't know if you can see that very well, but there's the glass that I got when I was there. Could you tell us about the initial thought about opening up your own distillery and how that progressed to you actually opening it up?
Sure. The initial thought was to secure an enterprise that my wife and I would enjoy doing. And looking at different models, we stumbled upon the fact that Alberta has all this premium grain. And it dawned on us that making whiskey is just a no-brainer. Like we have durum wheat right now that is in the form of pasta served in Rome. We have our barley in Japan making whiskey. Why aren't we a mega capital of whiskey here in Alberta? So I think we've done great. I think we can do even more. And that inspired us to start. And so back in 2016-17, we were looking at just how can we make this feasible, and how can we set it up in a way where we don't have a lot of other distractions, and the sole focus becomes aging spirits. Okay. And yeah, we put our feet to the ground and hands up and put it all together. And 2018, we figured out our mash bill. 2019, started barreling, and here we are now. Yeah.
So what did you and your lovely wife do prior to this?
Just jack of all trades, master of worked for construction. I taught overseas. Just a lot of series of things. And my wife, she was a journalist at one point.
Okay.
And we're both very well traveled, and that's how we met in Spain. So
Nice.
this spoke to us because as you're making a whiskey, a Canadian whiskey with Canadian expression, you need to profile this with other whiskeys, scotches, bourbons of the world. And so if we're not physically traveling, our palate is. And that's a beautiful thing to do when we get home and we feel like we have this itch to travel. And yet we find ways to do that with spirits and with whiskey. So,
I think that's a fantastic way to travel. And any place my wife and I go, we're usually looking for the distilleries and breweries. And when we're in Europe, vineyards and wineries and place we can visit to actually get more of that kind of one-on-one experience, kind of as much as you can. But let's get back to you. Why not beer? So because beer has the same thing. So why whiskey as opposed to a brewery? Let's say I'm sure you've had enough beer in the past. You have an appreciation for beer. You brew when you're there as well. So why not a brewery and why a distillery instead?
I believe distilling is probably where brewing was 10, 15 years ago for Alberta, right? Okay. When Alley Cat first came out, I remember I was in university back then, and my awe, right? Like, wow, we're making beer at this scale, and we're doing all these varieties, and that this kept happening for years, right? Aging myself, but over 2 decades, and so.
You're a lot younger than me, buddy.
Decide whether I'm going to be brewing or distilling, I just looked at the landscape. And for me, even today, I think the landscape is wide open for more distilleries to join, as long as they subscribe to making quality. And I think through COVID, there might have been an invitation for a lot of pop-up alcohol producing outfits. Yeah. Let's call it.
Let's call it an alcohol mixing outfit. Let's not even call them a producing one, because a lot of them didn't produce a thing. They just
there's room, there's room for them. And I'm happy that there's a wide range of different products out there. I think there's room too for people that want to do it to raise the bar, right? And just where can we take this? If we were to reach age statements, what's it going to be like if we have that patience and we have that attention to detail, right? And that's what's exciting in making whiskey is I don't know exactly where this is going to go. I'm committed now. I have some 5-year-old whiskey that I'm very happy with. It was a good study to get to where I am, and I'm still learning. But there's something we feel good at the end of the day, end of the week, end of the month with the products we have and the ones that we've paraded around outside of Alberta, outside of Canada. And we're looking forward to see where this can go.
Excellent. Beer, you would have been good at beer too. Let's just admit it. You would have done well with that as well.
Probably, yes. I would have enjoyed it.
And I've distilled as well. So let's go with you in distilling. What was the very first thing you distilled? And I'm guessing it wasn't there at that distillery. So, the very first.
Very first. Mm-hmm. Probably a home experiment going wrong, and not too many details, but the fermentation got out of hand, and I wasn't even able to distill it. That's when I realized, like, with distillation, small scale could represent a greater degree of difficulty because there's slight variations in temperature or yeast amount, concentration that could really take your project sideways, right? And when you're making it at a bigger amounts, forgiveness is found a lot easier, right?
Okay.
And so I'm not producing mega tons of fermentation like some big industry is.
Well, we see your stills right behind you. So,
Yes.
tell us how the capacity of those stills right there, if we could. So,
Yeah. So I have a 500 liter pot still,
yeah.
and then I have a column still. And basically, when I do my run, I'm dealing with about 2,000 liters
Okay.
of wash or beer, as we can call it. And so I'll do 4 runs in the span of maybe, depend how energetic I am, but it could be a day to 3. And the process itself, from the pot still to ending to capturing hearts, is about a 3.5 hour process.
All right. How active are you when you're there, when you're making the cuts? Do you know the smell of your still really well? You can be anywhere in there and you have that kind of whiff and you know you're rushing back to make your cut. I'm wondering how active you are now.
Much
Doing this for
like, that's the thing, right? Like we decide not to play with the mash bill, right? Some people will play with different variations of rye, corn, barley, what have you. We decide to keep one thing consistent, the mash bill, right? So that does not change. And with that, I was just looking a bit of my distilling schedule there, but in the past, I'm looking at in the upwards of close to 700 distillations. So you're absolutely right. I could walk in this room and just by smelling, I could say, okay, this is getting to the end of tails, or this is getting to be close to hearts. Very much so. I mean, if I have the doors open and air is blowing through, a bit more difficult, but essentially, yeah, I can tell quite rapidly where I stand with the distillation most times.
So you've had enough of your fresh distillate, your white dog. What's it taste like? If you're going to compare that to someone else's, what would you call that? How would you describe it as it comes off the still?
I think one thing that could be noticeably different from other new makes would probably be the fact that because we have a very long fermentation period of 10 to 14 days, initially you always get some banana bread aroma.
Okay.
That really takes over, and that's really consistent in having long fermentations, having those notes. I think that is probably what makes it different from others. If I was to choose one,
okay, and let's go back to your mash bill. What's your mash bill?
it is 65. So 65% rye at the bottom there. And then, so that's 65% rye, 25% barley, and then 10% oats is what it is. So we arrived to this because we found that, well, we wanted to use some of the grains that come from our land, and those do, along with wheat. We decided to keep wheat out. When people think about Canadian whiskey, they might think about Canadian rye whiskey, right? So we wanted to stay true to that, but we wanted to also mix in some barley because this is Alberta and we should be proud of our barley as well. So 65% rye is something that we were pretty happy with. 25% barley took it to another level in flavor. And then 10% oats, and I know you might say we should try with putting more oats, but it gives that mouthfeel. And together, we will never cook them, ferment them separately. We put them all together, and that marriage of those 3 grains sits in the fermentation tank for a long period. make something quite unique. If I wanted to be super efficient, let's say, and just focus on yield, I'd probably look at doing it separately, like doing my rye first, doing my barley, and then my oats.
Yeah.
And then mix those new makes together. But I'm not after yield. I'm after something unique and flavorful.
All right. And I'm guessing you would have tried it with wheat at one point, because wheat is so readily accessible there, and Red Shed has wheat as well, which is right near you. So did you try that, and did you like it, or what did you rather with the oats? I like the mouthfeel with the oats. I like the sweetness.
Yeah. Wheat does truly add something. I'm not going to talk bad about it. I mean, to begin with, when we started to make whiskey in Canada, it was a wheat base, right? Like that's where it started for Canada. So I know Wildlife's released a good wheat whiskey, and kudos to them, because I think that's a true homage to where it all started for Canada. At one point, we started to put like 5% rye, and then it took this course. And I think back then people's palate were a lot more sensitive. And from there, we've been just adding. But yeah, you're right. I've tried with wheat. I've tried with different grains, triticale, and others. But I found with these three grains, I had what I was looking for. And it took several attempts to just arrive at, okay, these are the grains. And then it took more attempts to figure out the ratios.
Yeah. Okay. And you've got it the way you want it. And you've had it at that ratio for how long now? Since the very beginning?
2000 and I'd say, 2018.
Okay.
Late 2018.
So
we made
any...
and this might be a special release at one point, but we have an all barley barrel. We have an all rye barrel as well.
All right. And I'm going to stop you there. I've been making you talk a lot. I'm going to show the video that we have, and hopefully this works out pretty well. It's a fairly short video, but it kind of gives us a little bit of a background with some of the other information I'm going to ask you for. So,
our journey begins with a challenging mash bill, a recipe designed to awaken every sense, a blend of malted rye, malted barley, and oats coming together in harmony. Our process is anything but rushed. A deliberate journey that's just getting started. During our leisurely 10 to 14 days of fermentation, we're not just making whiskey, we're crafting a dream for your taste buds. Complex flavors, enhanced aromatics, a velvety mouthfeel, and a spirit that seamlessly integrates in every sip. Meter Copper Still, the craftsman behind the scenes, diligently removing impurities and leaving you with a refined flavor that's uniquely Diony. The aging process, the grand finale, is where the journey to richness and complexity truly begins. Picture barrels carefully chosen and timed, acting as guardians of flavor, contributing to a smoother taste bud experience. We have a variety of barrels. Most are from Iron Crown, from a cooper in Onaway, Alberta. Tannins, lignins, oak polymers, sugars, ex-bourbon, ex-port, ex-wine barrels, and charcoal. They all play a role in the magic that happens as the barrels weather temperature changes, influenced by the cool breeze from the Canadian Rockies after a hot summer day. And here's the best part. Our obsessive infatuation with whiskey mastery is bottled in every offering just for you, offering you an unparalleled experience as a Canadian rye whiskey enthusiast. A unique experience that defines us. Authenticity is our promise, allowing nature to guide us, tailored for your enjoyment.
The only
Diony whiskey.
That's pretty good. So, which brings me back to why do you call it Diony?
Yeah, well, it's the short form of Dionysus. So we could call it Diony or Diony, but Dionysus would have come to Alberta looking for grapes to make some wine. Couldn't find the grapes, but found the greatest grain and made the finest and greatest whiskey.
Excellent.
That's
And the rye lover I am loves the amount of rye that you have in there. It makes me happy. And tempering it with the oats is really good. I should have also asked you why you didn't think of corn, because we do have corn southern Alberta, so it's available to us. We could call it homegrown stuff just as well. Do you like working with corn at all? Is it because it gives you the mouthfeel and it gives you the sweetness? So it's kind of the combination of kind of using wheat and using barley. No, sorry, not barley, but oats. Oats and wheat together kind of get kind of a corn-like feel to it. It's lighter.
I would say that's fair.
Right?
That's very fair. We didn't venture on that path because, frankly, we want to leave it to others. I mean, I think here in Alberta, we do have some great corn, and definitely it could be featured. For me, corn is going to be something I expect coming out of Kentucky, Tennessee, and I didn't necessarily want to be compared to that. Like, we had someone from Scotland visit our place this summer, and he was so happy that we weren't trying to make Scotch.
Okay.
He's been to all these bars, and they're like, "Oh, let me serve you a good Scotch." He's like, "I didn't come here to have Scotch.
I've got a lot."
And so with corn, a bit likewise. I think Americans have done so well in that respect that it's a tall order to deliver on. And so we decided not to experiment with that too much. Mind you, the cost of making it would be much lower. So maybe
There's
I should have
advantages.
spoken to my financial advisor
before you started. Yeah. That's all right. Oats are fairly cheap as well. I think. What is more expensive? Is it the rye or is it the barley?
Yeah, probably the malted rye. Yeah.
Is it? Okay. I was just wondering because I get them by the bags, and I go to Red Shed mostly for my stuff, and they give me a good deal no matter what. So it's I'm not buying it on the level that you are, even close. Yeah. So I'm okay with the $5 difference. But is it let's say $5 a bag? I don't even know how to do this by the.
I buy it by the ton.
I was going to say, yeah, I don't even.
So the difference is in the hundreds of dollars.
Okay.
When I compare it to the rye or the barley. But in the end, you want to be, regardless of the cost of making it, you want to stand behind it and be proud of it. And if I could give any advice to anyone going into this, if price is deciding what you're doing, you're probably doing it for the wrong reasons. If you just light up when you find your mash bill and the grains you're going to use, and you could stand behind it and make great things happen with it, then you're just looking at the price as, okay, well, that's how it costs. And maybe I won't make as much if it's on the more costly side, or maybe I can make a lot more if it's not on the so costly side. But when you find what it is you want to distill and it meshes well with your thought process and what you want to do with it, price is second to the grain.
Okay. Unmalted rye. Was that ever an option?
Yeah, well, right now we exclusively used malted rye to begin with, but in spending time with people with L'Allemand, which supply us with our yeast, said, you should just try maybe a mash bill that uses half of the rye that is malted and half that is not malted. And so we've been doing that this year a bit, and results are pretty good.
Okay. Does it change the flavor? Is it fruitier?
I wouldn't say it's fruitier, no.
Okay.
The mix for me, like, it's hard to tell because I've only filled a few barrels with it thus far. But I think we're going to keep going with it. If I compare just the new make to what it was, we also did adjustments with our still at the same time. So I probably shouldn't have done that.
Okay.
But I think what we're pulling out now could have a bit more flavor, as it's not maybe as rushed, if you can say. And the choice of going with malted versus not malted really has to do with enzymes, right? So the malted rye will have enzymes that help break down sugars eventually or starch to sugar. And so you don't need it in that amount. If you have a healthy yeast, you don't need to go overboard with malted grain, which is more expensive, right? So for us to mix malted rye with unmalted, as long as the taste is not compromised, we're fine. And that's kind of what we arrived to. Is it was fine. We made some adjustments with the still a bit so we wouldn't be producing so fast.
Okay.
And I think that has helped a bit with giving it a bit more sweetness. But those are the things that you experiment with time, right? Like out of the gates, it's hard to get all of that right. But at this point, we're getting so comfortable. Like you said, I could walk in this room and know exactly where we're at with the process. And now you just want to tweak it a bit to say, oh, what if I did this? And what if I did that?
Try that. That's what makes it fun, though, right? It's adventurous for you, and it's a creative gig, right? To be a distiller, the scientific process is there, and you're trying to replicate things as best you can and change things, although you did two the last time, but changing one thing at a time over time to get it the way you want it. So that's the scientific aspect, but there's also the creative side to you. You want to create something different, something new. What you've already created, you want to make that as good as possible. I'll liken that to beer. I make a fantastic Doppelbock, but I can't stay with a Doppelbock my whole life. I've nailed it down over the last 8 years, but I want something different. And this is your livelihood. You get to be creative with it, which is good. I'm loving it. So I'm looking at the stills behind you, and I'm wondering, did you buy one, then the other, or did you get both at the same time?
I got them both at the same time. And when we were doing quotes on this equipment, we had let them know that it was specifically to make whiskey. So it's the equivalent of a triple distilled. And it's seeing, I don't know how they measured this, but it's seeing about 28 kilometers of copper from the time it evaporates from the pot still to being or coming out in the form of hearts. So it's seeing a lot of copper. That's truly important. It's not something that other alcoholic products may encounter as much, and that's why Scotch is revered in some way. In one of the ways, anyways, is the whole distillation process. If done right, you will have a quality product. And so, yeah, the still was really made in thought that we would just be making whiskey, and it hasn't seen much else. Like I've had requests to distill vodka or gin. That's a big no, because the juniper berries will just taint the copper inside.
Okay.
So if you want to make gin, I would recommend just a separate still for that. But yeah, no, it's only seen my mash bill in the last 5 years pretty consistently. Like I said, it was one or two occasions of, a strictly rye, a strictly barley. Mind you, like if I was to make another spirit, clear spirit outside of gin, the fact that heads, the methanol comes out first. Every single time just cleans all the inside of the still, and so it gives it this blank new fresh start, if you want, and so our product's been coming out pretty consistent.
Nice. Okay. And I asked you what the first thing you actually made, and you said, well, it didn't go so well. How about the very first thing you made there on those stills right behind you?
The very first thing,
Yeah.
probably experimented with just strictly rye.
Okay.
And I have to say, rye is something else to tame. Not as much distilling, but more so in the fermentation.
Okay.
With the wrong pairing of yeast, which is kind of what happened. It just through the
Sticky.
fermentation exploded. It was just everywhere.
Okay.
Right. And so yeah, that was probably the first thing it's seen. The yield wasn't so great because we lost so much that way.
Okay.
But quickly after that, like we really narrowed down. We wanted to be a 3-grain spirit. So it's not like I did a whole slew of experiments with it. I think the end of 2018, we were pretty narrowed down. Yeah.
Okay, so let's go back into the development of the spirit. And where did you learn how to distill? So that's step one. But also, if you can link that to the people that might have helped you around there or where you learned it. So the help you got within the industry and where you learned it.
Sure. I'd say a lot of it goes back to Frank Dieter. He opened up Okanagan Spirit in British Columbia,
Yep.
in Vernon. And he was my number one consultant. And he
He's
got me
from
on.
Ontario, I think you told me, right?
What's that?
He's from Ontario, I think you told me.
No, originally probably Germany.
Oh, okay. Well, with the name, yeah, it makes
But
sense.
I think he's been around, but I think he's been in BC for quite some time now. And he got me into this somewhat. And because I did my research, right? So I picked up the phone, imagine that, and I phoned him, just cold call. And I just, hey, Frank, if you had to do this all over again, what would you do? And he went off and on just making whiskey and only the best.
Good.
And after an hour, I just, Frank, like, you sold me on this. Like, you don't need to say anymore. I was like, we're doing this. And by the way, like, we are doing this. So can you come down and show me the ropes? And once the still was all assembled, he would come down and just show me everything he knew. And initially we had a camera, right? And we were watching it back. And he came multiple times and we got very, very comfortable very fast. Doesn't mean that we didn't make our own mistakes, but I'd say he's the one that influenced us the most. Outside of that, I'd say Susan at Crane, Wildlife. We've stopped there and checked it out. Park Distillery as well. Eau Claire in Turner Valley, we were there. So we've been around, a few places in Alberta, several, to really get to where we are now. But overall, I'd say probably Frank played the biggest part.
The biggest role. All right. Well, shout out to him. Good for him.
Yes, Frank.
Cheers. And so that's the past. Essentially, we're going to try to get into the present. The past generally takes up more of the time, but I'm going to throw some pictures up here of everything. Actually, let's do a whole picture. So you on the other side. So I was thinking when you said you're going to do it from the distillery, it would be from that side. So that's on the left-hand side if I'm walking in, and you're on the right-hand side of the distillery walking in. As you walk in, you see this kind of between both rooms. So beautiful artwork. And well, that's kind of artistic too. While I go through this, tell us who takes care of your online presence, your social media. So talking about that video and these pictures, a lot of them very well done.
Yeah, I'd say it's a collection of people, either people that are inspired by what we're doing. My wife, in probably most circumstances, and as being a journalist, she has a good eye for taking shots from good vantage points, if you want.
I'm hoping this is hers because this was my favorite picture.
Yeah, it's a nice one for sure.
Yeah,
I think she did take that one.
Good.
And so outside of that, yeah, we've had people that like photography and we've involved them. There's Hot Shoe Studio, Dave Dinon. He's helped out with some as well. Okay. And yeah, that's where we are now. Like, yeah, I'm in the manufacturing side. On the other side is the tasting room, and we decided to make a gallery just to warm up the space, and it's worked quite well for us.
Oh, it looks really good, actually.
Yeah.
And both of these, talk about these pictures and the barrel heads. So pictures first, and then a quick comment about, can't remember where the barrel heads went. There. The
Yeah,
barrel head. Because nice story, but well, for both of them. So I'll leave this up as you explain it, tell you the truth, because we've got the painting on the one side and the barrels on the other.
Sure. So the painting is from Brett Heidi. She's an artist from Olds. If anything could be shared from central Alberta to the rest of Alberta or even Canada, is there is a hot spot here for artists, and Brett Heidi is one that is part of that community, and she manages to pull off these really colorful images of either nature, the countryside, what have you, and with really wide brushstrokes, she manages to actually form these shapes and create emotions through color that is pretty unique. It's not a style I've seen anywhere else. I basically, ironically with this one here, I met her at the horse show here in Red Deer, and she had her art hanging, and it's the only thing I could see from a distance, and it was quite notable. So then I approached her, and she decided to put things here, and we're a gallery as well, so we do sell her art. And then outside of that, the barrels. So the barrels, I always had a keen interest in history and archives, and I take pictures that could be dated, and I try to focus almost like from like the early stages of photography to probably like the early 40s. That is a sweet spot where people were taking pictures and not really knowing pictures were being taken. And so it really captures like the essence of that scene, right? Of what's happening in that moment. No filters involved, right? So I thought, why not take some of these archive pictures and burn them using a burning tool on the heads of the barrels and share some history with the whiskey. That was the thought.
It's kind of hard to see, but you can see maybe this way. It's not paint that is kind of burned as well. The other ones, they're a little bit too far away, but they are they're moments in time from, is it Red Deer specifically or Red Deer region?
They are, I've been to the Red Deer archives and worked with them. I work with pictures from Alberta archives and even with federal archives, national archives. So all really that you need to do is as much information you can get from the picture to make sure that is accompanied with it. And that's usually what we do. And it's pretty kosher. And it's nice to be able to share our history. I think there's a lot of history out there that should be shared. And in cases where people have come to the distillery, it's opened up conversations. It's broken the ice, if you want, and it's been nice to just reflect about where we've been, our past, and so yeah. I use a laser now, but before I used to do it all by hand with an instrument called razor tip from Saskatchewan, and it's nice to just escape and burn. When you're looking at a picture for an hour, 2 or 3, you get to know a lot more than if you're just kind of, going through pictures really fast. Like it starts telling you a story. You pick up on certain details that if you weren't staring at it for so long, you wouldn't really pick up. And that's what becomes really magical in doing those pieces on the barrels.
Nice. And so the artistic side comes out no matter what.
Yeah.
It's going to be there, buddy. Okay, good.
Yeah.
Let's go from this to maybe, so we're talking about the public and people that you've met. So I started thinking about the trade show. So let's throw you into a whiskey show. And I don't know if your wife goes with you often, but I did see her with you in Calgary. Did you actually have a booth then last year in Calgary, or were you
So
just?
we decided not to have a booth and just enjoy the show.
Okay.
And it was good. It was good just for us to have downtime. She's not too much of a people person,
Okay.
so she usually does avoid being part of those.
The massive crowd.
And I'm usually the face for our whiskey.
Okay.
And so there you go. Yeah.
Well, she seemed at ease and in her element when I met her in Calgary. So she did well. But let's put you in that situation. Let's get you behind the table and actually talking about your product. So and this happens often enough with our distillers, Canadian distillers. People go into a whiskey show and you have the stereotypical Scotch snob. And I'm allowed to say that because I'm the president of the Alberta Scotch Society. We have enough Scotch snobs in my group for me to talk about this pretty well. And they're not looking for Canadian whiskey. They're not. They're looking around, and often it's for the stuff they know really well, and it's the most popular of the brands, which it kind of hurts my heart a little bit when they do that. And they're looking for age statements, and they're pretty well restricted there. If you have this type of person, if you can picture this person in your mind, what do you want them to leave your table with? You're probably not going to change their mind about Scotch being the best, and because that's why they're there. But what do you want them to leave you with? What type of perception?
Perhaps just an opportunity to maybe poke a bit at their imagination of what could be and what is out there. If ice cream came out, first of all, it could have been a whole wide range of vanilla ice creams. And if I was to take my kids to a parlor with ice cream that just had a whole wide range of vanilla ice cream, they would probably be disappointed. I happen to like vanilla ice cream, so I probably would not. But my kids, different things. So in the world of aged spirits, I think you're slowly going to see a shift. I think my estimation is Scotch has done very well. They still do very well in what they do, and I can't take that away. They're masters of what they do. But for over a decade now, a lot of international competitions you've seen go to different nationalities, right? Yep. So whether it's Taiwan or Japan, what have you, and as long as they're doing the craft in an elevated way, so there's a framework, and they say, "Oh, this is not Scotch." Okay, yeah, it's not Scotch, right? Like that's okay. But why? How is it not Scotch? It's actually made from grain from Alberta, where this grain is shipped sometimes to Kentucky, Scotland, Japan, to make whiskey and similar products, and the footprint is lower. And how am I responsible with my end product? Well, it goes back to the farmer, and he happens to feed his animals with it. And there is a movement of locavores that want to find chocolate, cheese, whiskey that does not come from so far. Yep. And I think that's growing. And another thing that is probably growing is through heavy shifts in weather patterns, where we're getting more dry summers, summer after summer. Rye is resilient with drought. It's typically planted in the fall, so it lives all 4 seasons, just like most Canadians, right? And so it survives those 4 seasons, and it enriches the soil. It grows very tall, very fast, so it doesn't need as much pesticides. And then yes, it is Canadian, as Canadian rye whiskey and Canadian whiskey is kind of synonymous. Maybe give it a try. Maybe the Scotch is not something that can be replaced with the Canadian rye whiskey. It's not what we're trying to do. I think for people that are trying to do a Canadian rye whiskey, they're trying to capture what this land can contribute, and what frankly some people expect of Canada and we do have lots of tourists coming to Alberta, Canada, and if they come from so far, like this Scott person I had, he's not expecting me to make a Scotch-like Canadian whiskey. In fact, he was quite upset that he couldn't find Canadian-wide whiskey that was up of his caliber in the many bars he was at, and he was happy to come to this distillery. And so, how I would deal with these people, you're right. I'm probably not going to change them. But in time, everything changes, right? And so if everything changes, I think I'm well positioned to satisfy what people are looking for with evolving, changing times.
All right. Challenge your palate a bit, buddy. It's what
that's all.
And I do that a lot. We have our tastings, and I'll have a welcome whiskey, or I'll have a blind whiskey, and often I'll throw a Canadian whiskey into the Scotch kind of lineup that we have. And it's nice to hear what they think they are sometimes, where they are, Lowland, Highland, this, that. It's funny because unless you're thinking it's Canadian, often they don't pick it up. And these are people who've been drinking Scotch for a very long time and are pretty proud of their palate, but still, I'm messing them up with this every once in a while. Let's go back to Canadian whiskey, because I want to ask you what your quintessential Canadian whiskey is. So if I ask you what Canadian whiskey tastes like, I don't think that tastes like your whiskey. And I'd like to know the difference in your mind for what's a stereotypical quintessential. And I don't mean something that might have been the bar drinks in the States, the well drinks. I don't mean that. I don't mean the stuff that we dumped over the border for forever and made a killing on money. I mean, when you think Canadian whiskey now, what's coming to mind, and how are you navigating that with your whiskey?
Yeah, it's a tough one. Maybe even a reflection of what our community in many urban centers have become. It's a melting pot, of different influences, different cultures. You can't really say what's your typical Calgarian, Edmontonian, even Red Deerian for that matter, because it's so eclectic. And I think DeCumro or Phillips have stated that too, is you can't really narrow down what is typically Canadian. And so really it's an adventure of the unknown. And all you could expect is this whiskey the result of someone wanting to just make quick money, or is this whiskey for someone that is wanting to do something that is mind-blowing, or taking your palate on a nice voyage from taste to lingering notes and so on. And I think that answer is frankly impossible to coin, because we're so different. Like, I've been in distilleries from Quebec to Victoria, and I have to say, I can't say what is typically Canadian, but I can say from what hails as some of the best I've had, you're tasting the passion behind what they make, and that's exciting, and as you travel Canada and go to many cities, you find out how cities are making themselves known as being, well, that's Banff, and this is Jasper, and this is Canmore, this is Medicine Hat, and they're all frankly very different, and they all have something to offer. And I think our whiskeys do exactly that.
And I'm going to agree. Although I think I could think of the stereotypical 1980s Canadian whiskey, what that tastes like, and how that's perceived in the world. We'll leave it at that. But I don't think that's what we are now. And I agree with you. If we go throughout Alberta and we ask everybody for, and I do this all the time, so I'm there and I want something from the cask. I want your cask strength right from the barrel.
Unfiltered.
Unfiltered, non-colored, everything that I want.
Char in there.
It makes me happy when I see the char. and it's completely different. And let's say we water them all down to 46%, because if it's less than 46%, I get angry. But let's say we water them all down to 46%, they're still vastly different one from the other. And I really like that. And you and I talked about having an Alberta trail at one point, I think, because they have the whiskey trail, they've got the bourbon trail. Trying to get an Alberta trail is really interesting to me. If our province was about the fifth the size of what it is, I think we could get it done. But we could try one point. So let's talk about future endeavors now. So that's my future endeavor, what I want. I'm going to ask you two questions. So what are you most proud of as a business owner? And separate that for me from what are you most proud of as a distiller? So go to the business side and then go to the creative side for me.
Okay. So as a business owner, it's just making a final product that comes from raw resources from our country. We've been shipping out raw resources from this country for decades and buying them back as byproducts. And frankly, if you want Canada's economy to diversify, if you want a strengthened economy, we're putting a stop to that, and we're starting to manufacture our own byproducts for our own consumption, but also for export. So whether it be lumber, whether it be grain byproducts, it's high time that we do something with our resources. And business-wise, I'm happy to be part of that. Distilling-wise, I'm really happy about the 4 whiskeys that came out. They all have international accolades. I'm getting excited now about the new chapter, which is going to be blending. Blending is going to be something that I will explore some more, and I want to explore. I'm very confident with the 4 whiskeys that I have. There's 2 new ones rolling out this fall. And I think where it can be taken now is in blending. And I don't know what that looks like. It's a playground. So I'm happy to have fun there and enjoy it.
So let's differentiate what you do with someone like Dr. Don, who has all his corn, all his rye, all his malt. So blending for him is a little bit different from blending with you, because you've got your mash bill. They don't deal with the mash bill. So blending for you will be dealing with char levels and different types of woods, or is there something else in there I'm missing?
No, I think you're on the right path. It's different types of barrels as well. Putting my hands on an ice wine barrel and putting my hands on a sherry cask and on an ex-bourbon, ex-rye, ex-rum, and seeing what proportions can be put together so that it's not just one taste of a whiskey. It's what's happening on the foreground, what's happening on the middle ground, background, aroma, final lingering notes, like you name it. Like when you're able to blend to a tea, you're able to kind of dial into that. And I think that's exactly like you were saying, done through different woods, different finishes, acquiring different barrels. I think that's with the blending I see anyways for Diony Distillery.
Good. And a little picture of this again, because I love this picture. Talk about the woods and where are you getting some specialty wood? Because you have it made now, and that was said in I think it was in the movie as opposed to you there. But where are you getting specialty barrels? Do you have friends? Do you have connections? Or are these people calling you up and saying, we've got these 15 different types of woods in these different finishes? What do you want this month type thing?
Yeah, it's really looking at different wineries, or I'll just say it. Like I go on LinkedIn a lot, and I'm connected with a lot of coopers from around the world, and they'll just post what is available. And a good time to be exporting in barrels from afar is the winter. Because of the cool climate we have, it will be preserved quite well. If you're doing this in the summer, it might go rancid on you quite fast. So when you see something posted, you just have to act fast, right? And then you engage. Like LinkedIn gives you this ability of saying, no, I saw you post this now. You haven't posted this 2 weeks ago. It was just like an hour ago. Can you tell me when it was dumped last? And it's like, oh yeah, you're just putting it on there because it was just, okay, can you send me one? Right? And so it's so immediate. They're so proud about what they're doing and connecting with a distiller so far away that they want the same thing. And so it's like, you know what, when it gets there, put a bit of spirit in there, swish it around, have a taste. If you're not happy, let me know. And most times that's what I do. I'll put some spirit in there, some new make. I'll make some swish if you want. I'll taste it a bit and it's like, no, this is perfect. Then I know to fill it, right? And that's fun. That's exciting, right? And so that's kind of where I get most of my contacts, strangely enough, is through LinkedIn and just Coopers posting up what they're doing, and they're so into it that I feed off that, they feed off me, and then a connection is made and a great whiskey can be made.
Nice. And it makes me feel a little bit better that it's not some sales guy just pitching to you at one point in time. I don't know why. I know it's part of the business and I shouldn't think it, but I still like the fact that you're making links with other people in the business that are dealing directly with the wood, with the stuff on the inside. Do you still have any whiskey left in the glass?
I do.
Did. Do me a favor and talk about that for a second, because well, I already reviewed mine, the Campfire, and I liked it. So I'd like you, if you could, review yours, but not just that. When you're tasting this, what goes on in your head as to possibly making it better? What would you change?
So first of all, this is the port cask finish. It sits
I had
at
right from the barrel too when I was there too, I think. Didn't I? I loved it. And my buddy Nick,
50%. It's actually the picture that you had on with me poking at the other end there.
Do it.
And so what's happening in this image is the redness is from the port. And some of that port was imbibed in the Devil's Cut. The Devil's Cut is the layer that you'll see here or there in that picture. And so when I put my whiskey in there, it's going to pull some of that port in the spirit. And then on that surface, there are sugars from the port. And my whiskey will dissolve those sugars. And so it makes it sweet. And it creates this wine influence, port finish type deal. And that's what we're doing. So how can I do this better? I am playing with it. And it's really temperature changes. What I find is I document my temperature changes on barrels. And again, because we have hot days in the summer and cool nights, or when the manufacturer side of the distillery is working, I get lots of high heat and I have my barrels perched up high in the high bay. They do go through lots of temperature changes. And I think to make it even better, Dolph, is when I first put it in there, I should spin probably 20, 25 liters of whiskey for maybe 5, 10, 15 minutes to really get those sugars to dissolve. Then from there, I'm filling it up. And from when I'm filling it up, I'm going through temperature changes. But I've noted that it takes 2-3 days of one temperature to then go to another. So it's not an instant flash because it won't really impact anything inside. So 2-3 days of temperature changes. When it's hot, the oak will expand. When it's cool again, the oak will contract. By doing so, right, you're getting more from the Devil's Cut. You're also getting those lignins and tannins, all those polymers of oak that break down into the whiskey. And so that's where I'm venturing off with port cask finish version 2.
Okay.
So there you go. That's kind of where I would play with. And then sourcing these port barrels, right? Like finding that excited Cooper on the other side that just dumped it and knowing that he's going to send me something quality is something I was able to secure my first shipment of these barrels. And to do that again might be a challenge.
Okay. You still had some of that in the barrel. How long are you thinking you would keep it in the barrel? before transferring it to a more neutral wood? Let's say you want to keep it for 15 years. You still have a little bit, you want to keep it. When are you pulling it out of the barrel generally? And I know this changes, depends on the situation, but if you have a timeline in your mind as you buy something and you're thinking in the future, because you're not just thinking right now, you're thinking about what's going to happen several years down the way. How long are you thinking it's going to stay in the port barrel before changing over or using right away or changing over?
For me, the port barrel is like a finish. So it's done many things before arriving there, and I'm putting it there to make it sweet, give it some wine, port influence. And so I do have some sitting in a port barrel that's been over a year, and I'm tracking what that's going to do. But just like you can have a whiskey that's been overly oaked, I think you can have probably a port finish that's too close to port, where you're not getting the benefit of the grain, right? So it's something to monitor for sure. But I would say when I'm looking at a port cast finish, it's going to remain in the finish, which I think it's going to be anywhere from like a month and a half to pushing it at a year. But over that, I think it's becoming excessive.
Well, we've hit the hour mark. We've gone through the past. We've done the present pretty well. We've touched at the future, and I'm going to really quick to the future. We're going to be at the Banff Whiskey Experience November 29th, 30th, and I'll be there December 1st driving home. Have you picked out, or do you think you've picked out the whiskey that you're going to bring to our master class? And for those people out there, Stephane will be one of 5 people on the panel bringing so straight from the cask. So obviously cask strength, non-chill filter, no colored. We don't have to say no neutral grain spirit because these guys don't deal with it or touch it. But that's what we're looking for at this. And have you kind of picked it out, do you think?
Yeah, I think it's between 2 barrels now. And it's going to be a 5-year-old. And it's probably going to be mostly the base of my whiskey, right? So what does that rye, barley, oat taste like if it was in a barrel? Probably at a char 2 or 3 for 5 years. And what does that taste like? Because I've tasted it, but I don't think with all my products, people are getting it because there's always a finish or there's multiple barrels. Or there's a slight form of blending. So just the way it is, just my mash, what is it at 5 years? I think that's what it's going to be.
That's what we want, the purity of it all. Well, thank you, sir. I'm going to leave you with any last comments. Do you have anything to add to this before I see you in just a month and a half, I think? Yeah, pretty close.
Yeah, not much to add. If you haven't tasted the Diony whiskey, give it a try and let me know. And outside of that, no, thanks for having me, and happy to be part of it, and have a great week.
It's my absolute pleasure, everybody. And like I always say, click like, subscribe, and another plug, Whiskey Book Club this weekend. So I'm interviewing Ralphie for his second book. So we did the one book 6 months ago. We're on to his second book now. So he's going to be on, I think it's 11 o'clock. We haven't decided 11 or 12. I'm pretty sure it's 11 o'clock on Saturday morning, which is 6 o'clock his time. So anyone out there want to listen to Ralphie and me for a little bit? Do it. Otherwise, I will see you all soon, and I will see you in a month and 2 weeks, kind sir. Looking forward to it. Looking forward to everything that we're doing. Thank you, kind sir. And you know what? I'll make myself big so I can at least cheers people properly. They don't want to see my mug during the regular thing, but at the end I can do it. Cheers, everybody. Have a fantastic week. We'll see you next Tuesday. Ciao.